40% of the buyers have come from outside of the city, either outside of Lansing or even in a number of cases outside of Michigan. So something's going on in the last couple of years where a huge number of the buyers.
That's a really good sign.
Folks returning to the urban core because of the affordability, because of the walkability. It could be our wonderful transit system through CATA, what have you.
You said you've sold 100 houses. Now, do you do follow-ups to see how if the same people are still living in them, to see if there's any continuity or?
Yeah, we do some tracking. We don't, overly do that. But, we had some land contract sales that we kind of, we didn't educate the folks as much as we should have. We let them get in the house without a lot of commitment. So that was rough from 5 years ago and stuff. But that looks to be very successful. The land contracts and mortgages, we do mortgages, have looked good. We certainly have a lot of the buyers coming to us by word of mouth from prior purchasers, which is really what you're after.
Yeah.
That's a marketer's dream, a realtor's dream to have referrals sell the houses. I go to all the closings. It's one of the joys, the job to meet the couple or the wife or the single mom and the kids and stuff. And they're just delighted. We know they're getting an energy efficient home. It's like new. It's going to treat them well. And we're bringing new people into the city.
I've got a question for you too. How did the auctions go? Did they go well? What was your just sort of overall appraisal?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I'm not a big fan of auctions, but we did things a little bit differently this year. If you wanted to sell things at the auction, which I guess ultimately becomes the goal, they were barn burners. We had 215 people registered for the August auction. We sold 80% of the properties that were individually offered.
Wow.
Didn't recoup many of the taxes, because the tax delinquency on the parcels is so large compared to what we sell. But we had a younger group of, I believe, more community-minded investors at that auction.
Oh, really?
And those are some of the folks that bought the houses. I stopped at a house that a guy was rehabbing on the east side last week because I like to check out and see what happens. And he was putting in, he's a better guy, not a bottom feeder, predatory guy. He was putting in oak cabinets in the kitchen.
Wow.
He prides himself on doing a high quality job, and he's got the place leased already because people know that he produces a nice product. And so that's great to have those type of individuals coming into the marketplace. And I think the auction, the volume of people in the bidding is an indicator that folks are getting a little bit more money. They're feeling a little bit better about the urban environment, and they're willing to invest in it.
Are we seeing the average age of the homeowner in Lansing come down at all? Because it's always been sort of an aging population.
Well, it's not an aging population that I go to at the closings for the land bank,
Because those are the young families.
Yeah, and social media is a big part of how we recruit, and again, word of mouth, and we have a younger clientele. A lot of single parents, moms and dads moving in with their kids. So it's just a lot of fun to be able to see that.
Refresh my memory. How many communities in Michigan have land banks now?
Well, it's grown quite a bit. We have 82 counties, or 83 counties, sorry, and 82 other than Ingham. 37 of those counties have land bank authorities, and most of the urban centers do have them. We're a national leader, though, and I think recognized that way. I invest a lot of time and energy in it, and I think that's helpful to move it along. The partnership with the city, the mayor is a great supporter and advocate for what we're doing. If you don't have that, it's a lot harder. We are certainly the state model for that relationship between the county and the city for the partnership.
Would we be looking at a different Detroit if a land bank had been in effect down there during its downslide?
Well, you're talking 40 years ago probably to get at it where we are here. But I think that a land bank as a preventive measure is a lot better than a heart surgeon trying to bring the body back. And so, yeah, that would have been great. But that was started 40 years ago. Massive depopulation.
That's great news. So you have, in addition to the good news about the land bank, we've got the new checking program. We've got the opportunity for people to get trained to become a tax preparer and sort of give back to the community. And I do think it's a great clip for a student to be able to have on their resume. Now, there's one website where they can go and portal to everything.
They can go to Ingham Land Bank and they can go to Ingham County and hone in on the treasurer's site. We try to cross-populate a little bit, but they're kind of different worlds.
They are different worlds, but that keeps you hopping all over town all the time.
And the one other thing I would touch on, because it's the relationship with Lansing Community College, is the Restoration Works program on the east side. What we do with Allen Neighborhood Center. They've got a window replacement class that focuses on lead-safe practices coming up September 25th. And that's something you can.
Lead-safe.
So go to Restoration Works or Google Restoration Works and you'll find that.
Because when you take your windows out, that's when you often get the lead dust. Is that the idea?
Well, you need to make sure that you've encapsulated the lead paint, or that you're careful and use the breathing mask and stuff. With lead paint and the issues that affect the children in the household, if you wash things down frequently with soap and water, you're miles ahead, because it's the dust from opening and closing the windows that really creates the stuff that gets into the air.
It just hangs on for a long time, doesn't it?
Cleanliness really works.
Still next to godliness, eh? Well, thank you, Eric. And this is our monthly update. Lots of news this month. Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to that. We'll see you the second Monday in October. And then we may be a little busy on the election time, but we'll make sure that report gets in.
It's the Monday after, so it's a
we
day.
should be all right.
Got almost a week.
We got almost a week to recover. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
this
you.
is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And now we're going to change gears and talk about even more politics. We are joined this evening by Geraldine Lasher, Communications Director for Governor Snyder, and by Todd Haywood, who is a reporter for the American Independent News Network, formerly Michigan Messenger, a much missed publication, I must admit. But Geraldine, apparently you have news. You were actually down there in Tampa.
I was there, yes.
Tell us about the convention.
It was a very busy convention.
Was it?
And, certainly with everything that was going on with the weather and not knowing exactly what would happen with the schedule, that added an element of surprise to everything as we were going through. But we're just thankful that, the storm wasn't worse and we didn't get really hit down there, but it changed the whole schedule.
It seemed our governor was showcased well down there, I thought. He got on national media and he was, I thought, treated quite well and had numerous opportunities to sort of tell Michigan's story and what was going on here.
He did, and that's really what he wanted to do. I mean, that was really important for him to make sure that people knew what we're doing in Michigan and how he sees really some of the stuff that we've done in Michigan, how they need to take that approach in Washington and really make a difference. So, we had a great opportunity to talk to folks down there, really tell the Michigan story. He did a lot of interviews. He did a really interesting panel the last day we were there, which was Wednesday, with Bloomberg and Google, really talking about the innovation economy. And it was really interesting.
He would love that, wouldn't he?
He was. It was
in his element.
He was. And what was even, and picture him sitting next to Tom Friedman from the New York Times. And they were like schoolgirls talking. Like they were so excited, talking back and forth with all of this stuff. But it was really interesting. I mean, just the ideas and things, and looking from the Google perspective or Bloomberg perspective, it was really interesting to see.
Did you get to go to Newt University?
To what?
Newt University. Newt Gingrich held his own little.
I missed out on Newt University.
Oh, no. The first place I would have headed. They gave me
I'm
little
sure.
certificates.
We did not.
Souvenirs.
We were very booked. We missed that one.
Did you?
Yeah, we missed that one.
I don't know. To me, it would have been.
There were a lot of speakers that came in and spoke to the delegation and did some of those.
But I have to.
Where did the delegation stay?
At the Embassy Suites. I'm sorry. Embassy Suites, right, basically we had a phenomenal location. We were right next to the convention center, right next to the Tampa Forum. This was my third convention over the number of years, and this was the only time we've ever been literally able to walk right across and go over to the convention center. So that was really nice, very convenient. It was a very different scenario for me, having gone to a couple before, just how different the security is. And I think it was increased even more so this year than what people were saying it was like even in New York or Minnesota. It was a very strict perimeter, very strict security, and I'm sure it was like that in both locations. But it was hard getting in and out of the perimeter, so it was very convenient being
clear
there.
that you were lucky if you could actually get there, even if you had all the right credentials.
The lines were phenomenal. You really had to get in and get in early.
The shock from that convention, though, was no bounce. And do you think it was Clint?
I think
Clint in the empty chair worried me. I mean, I was sitting there that night when I saw Clint start talking to an empty chair. It was like old man yells at cloud.
it was a little different. We weren't there at that point, so I was watching it on TV like everybody else was. We had come back on Wednesday, so the lieutenant governor could go down there because the governor and the lieutenant governor don't like to be gone at the same time. So we missed that in person, and I think it was a little. I think what he was trying to accomplish didn't really come off the way I think he intended it to. I think it was a little
It became
different.
a distraction.
It did. But I think, traditionally the party that goes second, the incumbent party, usually gets a bigger bounce. That's just when you look back at what's happened in the past, that's usually the norm.
Yeah. Zero bounce, though, is unusual. Zero bounce out of the convention, I think, is unusual. And the Republican Party didn't really get a bounce out of theirs. I mean, they had a few days in between.
No, well, I think, it was, when you were down there, it really was the high level energy. I mean, the fact that, people were very motivated and fired up and ready to go. There's just a small number of undecideds. And so that's really
right.
key.
We're looking at 3 to 6%, and of course,
which is unusual.
And it is, and it doesn't matter if you're in a state that isn't one of the swing states. So really, there's
just find a way to give them $10,000 each.
Instead
of advertising.
We have just hit $1 billion.
You will see a lot of commercials, I'm sure. You will see quite a few.
We're not seeing any in Michigan, though.
No, you're seeing some.
There's no campaign, though, is there? Right now, I thought they both pulled.
The third party groups. I think
third
the
party.
third party
Sure.
ones pulled out some of it because, they're doing the constant shuffling between the states and
I think
changing
that
day to
changes
day.
day to day as well. I think once the word gets out that you pulled, then there's a lot of pressure for you to go back in. That's the kind of thing that happens over time. A lot of the ground game this time, though, seems to be happening online. A lot more emphasis on get out the vote. It was quite a good panel on the Chris Hayes, my favorite. Up with Chris Hayes. I get up every 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and Sundays now and watch Chris Hayes. And they were explaining that in this era, as TV ads are so saturated and the same audience with such a small group, it's the Get Out the Vote initiative, and a lot of that is occurring online. So I would think that Michigan would be ahead of the game with our governor, geek that he is, getting together a sort of cyber ground game here in Michigan. Is that what the plan is?
It really is interesting, and that's one of the panels that he also did down there with CBS News and The Atlantic and National Journal about really how social media has changed just that dynamic and that landscape in politics. So, the importance of really making sure your presence online and really, like you said, the grassroots and get out the vote efforts that has now moved from the phone banks to online.
We now see that a campaign volunteer will be given things like an iPad, and they can go to the door, and because they have integrated all the databases, they'll know so much about the person behind that door that they know which little 30-second videos to pull up on the iPad to show the person when they come to the door. I mean, that's the kind of targeted voter get out the vote that we just weren't able to do before.
No, it's completely different.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, to Governor Schneider's credit, he really changed the way Michigan politics operate in terms of using the internet. I mean, he really did some innovative stuff using internet technology, new technology.
Now, if we only had the broadband to support it.
We're working on that. We're working on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When he did his infrastructure announcement, it wasn't just roads and bridges. We need to have, there's too many areas in the state where we don't have sufficient broadband. So absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, even when you look at it, just, how different it was maybe even 2 years ago in terms of what took place from an online or social perspective. And then when you think about 5 or 10 years ago, you can't even recognize any of the, just how different it was.
That's why we see fewer yard signs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's really no need for them nowadays. Now, they said
always have to be there.
They said over the weekend that the single most successful effort that they found online is when they email you a little map. And it says, and it shows your house, and it says, thank you for voting the last time. They don't know for sure who you voted for, but they say, thank you for voting. And here it shows all the little pins of all your neighbors who also voted. And they said, and we'll be sending you another map as an update right after the election.
Shaming you into voting, or your neighbors know?
Getting you out to vote. That would do it to me. I wouldn't want to find out my neighbors knew I didn't vote.
That's a
Russia.
little intimidating, actually.
I know.
I'm not
didn't
sure
know that.
that's.
Well, there's that new place. Where is it? Down in Houston, that's watching us all the time. Anyhow, maybe.
Yeah, well,
And apparently you can drive 85 miles an hour down there too.
for
What
a
was
fee.
that was
For a
the-
fee.
Yeah.
That's right, the toll road.
Yeah, it's a toll road.
Well, one of the things that's going to be happening in Michigan on this upcoming ballot that's quite a controversy is the little checkbox that I ran into when I went to my local township in November, where they asked me if I was a citizen. And the governor had not wanted that law passed. That law has been vetoed, and now yet we still are going to be seeing that on the ballot this fall because our Secretary of State has decided that she wants it there. And I guess I don't understand in this era. Don't we have laws anymore that when you veto something, that means it's not going to be on the ballot?
It's that one is
Sticky.
interesting because it's apparently at some point in time, anybody who applied, there was they didn't check for citizenship. So they feel, I think from the Secretary's perspective, they were concerned that there are people who were not eligible to vote who were on the rolls. From the governor's perspective, the reason he really was concerned with it is that he was concerned that there was going to be a lot of opportunities for people who are citizens and really are well-intentioned when they go to vote, but they just don't check a box. And so was that going to spoil the ballot for them? So he thought it made much more sense that by signing the ballot, instead of saying, I, Geraldine Lasher, a U.S. citizen, just put that right in your signatory statement. That when I sign that and I affirm that, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen and I am eligible to vote, he thought that was a much simpler way to really ensure that that was being taken care of instead of here I am doing another step and having to check a box.
Oh,
So
at my polling place, the little old ladies behind the table said, "Are you a citizen? You have to prove it, or because I check the box for you, or I don't hand you the little slip." So they take that stuff seriously.
Application in every area is different. That's the problem
That
with
is
things
the
like
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
It's the person behind
the training and that was another part of it too. He wanted to make sure that there was time to do consistent training and that was the language was pretty vague in terms of training, so we wanted to make certain that while we could say yes, we know that the secretary is going to do training, how do we know 10 years down the road that it would actually be training? So some of those things they were just questions. So he did veto it, but they are moving ahead with still having that on the ballot. I don't know if there's other steps for
Now,
appeal.
Susan Maston, who is a good friend of mine, she absolutely refused to sign it. And she, I think, was one of the people that prompted that 10 or 11 o'clock phone call from the Secretary of State's office saying they had to take the ballots. And part of the concern is that it's the sort of possibility of a jam up, especially. I mean, that was a light election. You get into the fall election where people are standing in line, and if we get into these kinds of foofras where people are arguing over this and the idea of moving provisional ballots to the side if there's a conflict, it just seems to me that if this were Iraq, we wouldn't see very many purple fingers. So we want to be careful.
Well, in a presidential year, the turnout is going to be so much
Huge, I think.
higher.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So is there a concern that the governor has, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this,
No.
but is there a concern that the governor has that this is going to interfere with the electoral process in November?
Well, I think we want to make sure that, again, people, well-intentioned people who miss checking that those ballots aren't spoiled and those ballots aren't thrown out. So, we'll continue to have, I think the legislature wants to continue to maybe make some legislative fixes to that would affect. But we've got a very short window because overseas ballots, absentee ballots will be going out very soon. So we
That's
do have
what
a
I
small
wondered.
window.
Are those on the absentee ballots as well?
I believe so. And I think I want to say I don't have the exact dates, but in
Usually
October,
bills
those
are
start going out.
reliable.
I get it. I take absentee ballots, but one of the last times I voted, in person for an identification, I used my white card, which is the Indian tribal card,
Oh,
just to
really?
screw them up.
So you held up the line.
Yeah, I did. There was no line.
I was behind you.
I wanted to see how they react. Because it's a legitimate ID, and it was kind of funny.
Now, does it have a picture and an expiration date?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
So how often do you get those?
I don't recall anymore.
Well, that's
But
good.
a lot of them aren't up to date because there's only a few places you can go get them, obviously.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I don't want to miss out, too, on discussing what happened at the Democratic convention where our governor was she was, I think, the alternative to Clint Eastwood. Clint was a little slow, perhaps, and she was a little, shall we say, over the top. I thought that was what did you think of that, Ted? That was quite the performance.
I have to be honest with you. I only read the speech
Oh, you
because
didn't see it?
I don't actually like to see Jennifer Granholm perform. I got to see that when she was in office, and as somebody who's trained as an actor, you can see when somebody's playing the actor game, and she plays the actor game too much. I didn't like it. Didn't like it when she was in office, and I don't like it now.
But you've never seen it the way it was done on that.
It was like
Trust me.
amped up.
It was fist
from
pump.
what I've
It
heard,
was.
I don't want to see it.
Well, watch YouTube. You've got.
But it was interesting because I was at an event with the governor. We were
Yeah.
over in Grand Rapids, and so when we get in the car, I'm just looking at the feeds basically. So I'm just looking at the Twitter recaps, and I couldn't really get the full sense of it because I'm just watching people's posts, but I kept seeing caffeinated and some words like that, and I'm like, I don't know what. And then when I saw it, I was like, okay, now the Twitter feeds make sense of what I was
Megan
kind of
Holland
reading.
posted that she might have been a little caffeinated, and I said, "Caffeine? Are you sure?" I said that a whole bunch of people are wasting a lot of money on meth.
Yeah, I know.
Money.
I mean, caffeine will do that to you. You don't need anything more
I've never
powerful.
seen anything like that. It was over the top.
Sure. But that was absolute political theater. I was watching a 2-minute film today that I'm going to show my students tomorrow, and they took Thomas Jefferson's quotes against John Adams and John Adams' quotes against Thomas Jefferson, and they made political ads out of them just as we would today. Trust me. It was nastier back then than it is today. I mean, it was really over the top. They were calling each other vermin and swine. And so
We're actually semi-civilized now in comparison to what we were at the founding fathers.
Yeah.
We didn't call them out for a duel.
No.
Right.
No.
Although, duels may actually be more entertaining now.
Well, you could do laser tag or something.
We could do laser. We could do
Paintball.
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 Yeah.
I kind of like the idea of doing the fake wrestling or the cage match, to the death wrestling match.
Speaking of cage matches, the debates are coming.
Yes, they are.
I checked the schedule.
What a segue, Ryan.
Well, I'm hoping. I mean, I would love to see one real debate rather than these sort of staged 2-minute, discussions.
This is the time. This could be one of the few times a debate really matters.
I think so
I
too.
mean,
No,
the
I
debate
think so.
could make the difference. One good debate.
I know. With the economy, the shambles that it is surprising that the Republican ticket isn't doing better. And I do think that Romney needs to reintroduce himself. The convention did not do. For those of you that's why I was so interested in your perspective. I think probably for the people there, it was much more powerful than it might have been over television. I mean, I found that so often. I'm at an event. I have one perspective totally different to the people who are at home.
I think what's interesting too, though, is that when we talked about this when we were talking with some of the reporters down there, I think the era of a 4-day televised convention, we're past that now. Yet we continue to have that as the model. So I think there's probably things that we need to be doing that's more streaming, that's more, kind of taking care of the housekeeping business that's a part of every convention. Getting those condensed, and really streamlining it a little bit. Because I do think 4 days, people are tuning in and out. They really aren't. It's not appointment TV like it used to be in the past because we didn't have all of the other ways that we were getting our information.
I'm old. I remember Huntley and Brinkley, and it started in the early morning, and it was on at 7 o'clock.
Well, actually, the conventions mattered more.
It's because
you didn't know who might.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't predetermined going in like it is today. I mean, we know who it's going to be.
I loved the era when McGovern was nominated and you didn't get to speak till 3 a.m. I was one of those people that stayed up to listen to the speech, and I think there were me and 6 others.
Well, and that raises the question. I mean, I have to tell you, I've been watching political speeches, convention speeches, believe it or not, since 1980. As a 10-year-old, that was my first real inkling of politics.
There's a clue about what Todd's life's been like.
Yes, exactly. That tells you a whole lot about my life. Thank you.
I was a geek as well,
but I have to tell you, I thought Romney's speech was one of the worst delivered speeches, worst convention speeches I've ever seen, and it was because it didn't talk about any policy issues. It talked about mom and apple pie, and did it seem that way in the convention hall, or I mean, we're using it there? But
I was back by then, but I think from folks that I've talked to, I mean, it was. I think they looked at it more that this was Mitt Romney really again trying to introduce himself and again kind of telling the nation kind of who he is and the type of person he is. So I think that's what they were looking for. Different than heavy policy end and those types of pieces. It's always a tough one. And again, whoever goes first has the disadvantage of,
You should have heard Joe Scarborough today, the resident Florida conservative congressmen go after the Romney campaign today and just say, you're not going to get away with not telling anybody anything. You can't not show your tax returns, not tell anybody what programs you've cut.
Right.
And he went after him big time because of the Meet the Press performance yesterday. They felt that Romney had, again, another chance to be more specific and word.
And I think
now
that's
the
what
Republicans
we'll
are
want
kind
to
of turning
see.
on him.
We'll want to see in the debates and,
Right,
and see
exactly.
more of that. And, you know, again, it's tough. We feel like we've been in this campaign for so long because, you know, every aspect of it has been online and been televised. But really, now we're in September. Now we're at the point that people start to pay attention and you know, more people kind of get engaged in it really. And I think this is the time to do it.
See, everybody was a lot more delighted with the Democratic campaign than I was in some ways because of the same level of theatricality that you were talking about. I felt some of the speeches. I mean, you can't have every speech a showstopper. You know, Broadway knows you have to throw in a couple soft songs along the way. Everybody was trying to top everybody. And, you know, I hate to say this, but I got like really sick of Mom in Chief and Mom this and Mom that. And, you know, let's be honest about it. When they cheered, when they wanted to keep God out of the platform, I was right there with them. You know, the atheist vote, that's me. I mean, I was, yes. And that's bad news. That's going to be used against them. I mean, to me, that was a real plus. So most conventions are not really aimed apparently at me.
And you can't, I mean, anybody who thinks, well, it's going to be 100% of every single thing that I agree with. I mean, that's just not what our political system is. It's, you know, if you can't have an interesting debate and a dialogue and, you know, hey, I agree with you on this much, but I don't agree with you on this part, then I mean, you're boring if you're just hanging around with people who only agree with you. So, I mean, that's part of the debate.
Was there anything that you saw there that totally surprised you?
Totally surprised.
I mean, you just went, oh my gosh, or wow.
Cute buttons?
What amazed me was just where Michigan was on the floor. I remember when we walked in, we were, you know, the security was taking us around, so we knew exactly where we'd be for all the movements for the governor. And I'm walking, I'm not paying attention. I'm in the convention hall, and nobody was really there. They're setting stuff up still. This was Monday, and there wasn't really activity on Monday. And, you know, I'm texting, and I'm talking, and I'm not paying attention where I'm going. And I realized, I'm like, why is he taking us to the stage? I'm thinking, why are they taking us all the way up to the front of the room? I was absolutely flabbergasted. Michigan was the very front row delegation sitting right front and center in front of the stage. That blew me away. That was absolutely amazing to me. And what was really, what I really liked, or what was really nice to see was when the governor did the floor vote, when basically he did the announcement of delegates for Mitt Romney, he turned it over to Scott Romney, his brother, so Scott could actually call the votes for Michigan. And that was really touching because you could see how much that meant to Scott Romney and the Romney family. I mean, that's just, you know, a wonderful Michigan story. So that was neat. That was really impressive to see.
I hadn't seen his brother before. Now, does he still live here?
He does. He's in Southeast Michigan. Scott was a board of trustee member out at Michigan State for a long time. And just when you look at him, you're like, oh my gosh, you are George Romney's son, because he looks so much like his father. He really is uncanny.
So, did you have an opportunity to see any little clever buttons? I mean, what happened with the CNN camera people? That was a little worrisome.
Oh, that was very strange. I saw that was ridiculous. I mean, anybody who's gonna do that inappropriate is just absolutely ridiculous. It's really good people watching. I mean, and you can see that on TV. The outfits are really good people watching. Whether you're at the Democrat convention or you're at the Republican convention.
They still do it.
I mean, it is fascinating. That is a fabulous red, white, and blue sparkle vest you have on.
Yeah,
you know, the bedazzled
sequins. Yeah.
You know, absolutely. It's
They're
great people
electronic
watching.
now, they flash.
Oh yeah, yeah. Texas had the big star and then the stripes all over. I mean, the Lone Star shirts. It's a hoot.
Does it that they sell it there? I mean, I can't imagine where you get this stuff, you know. I mean,
they find it.
They find it.
They find it.
There's factory in the basement that
all
turns
kinds
it
of
out.
hats. There's buttons, and you know that's.
Did you get into the swing of things? And
I didn't get any sparkle shirts or anything like that.
Did you get any buttons?
I did. I got a couple buttons, just little, you know, stars and stripes and those types of things, but nothing that flashed. Unfortunately, I missed out on that.
Was there something that was highly sought, a memento or some kind of souvenir?
There was. I missed it. I was busy. I was running around nonstop working.
It's not like the Olympics where you're trading pins.
Exactly. No, not like that.
So I want to ask sort of one other thing that's sort of an observation that I had as well. I was really uncomfortable during the last night of the Democratic convention when there was lots of talk about we killed Osama bin Laden and lots of cheering and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, bloodlust.
That bloodlust really troubled me. But at the same time, there was no recognition from the top candidates in the Republican Party of our armed services and our armed forces.
No mention of Afghan war.
Was that an intentional choice, do you think, or do you know what happened there?
Well, I think because I saw a presentation, it was the day before they were doing rehearsals, and it was an absolutely beautiful tribute to veterans. The song, the video, I saw them performing it there, and so I don't know when that played exactly. They were rehearsing at the time that I was in the convention hall to do it. I don't think that played in the primetime viewing.
They cut it for kids.
So I don't know. I don't know when exactly that was. It was absolutely beautiful.
Because there were a lot of last minute adjustments made. That's the other thing that happened.
Right. I don't know. I don't know why that was timed differently or why that wasn't, but it was beautiful. I saw it was I don't know what the song was, but I think it was an original song that this man was singing, and beautiful imagery of veterans and really thanking them for their service. So yeah, that was unfortunate that wasn't seen from the audience at home. Because they really they did a lovely job.
In fact, Marco Rubio's speech was cut. I mean, one of the stranger things was, and he's the next generation. He's the one that they really have to.
I thought his speech, by the way, was fantastic. I think of all the speeches I saw from the Republican convention, Marco Rubio's was one of the most well constructed and delivered.
But because, well, I don't know if you read it because it may not have been as delivered if you weren't watching it, because it was cut when Clint Eastwood showed up, because he did show up at the last minute, and then they changed everything. I mean, and the same thing happened at the Democratic convention, which is that it was always a sort of program in flux. People were being cut, people were being added, that kind of thing. And it must be the stage management for something like that. I can imagine.
As a former stage manager, I would not want anything to do with that moving show.
Logistics must just be unbelievable.
So, sort of stepping back to the bloodlust from the Democrats, or are we misreading it? I mean, did you feel like there was sort of a bloodlust when they were cheering the death of Osama bin Laden?
I think, you saw there was a lot of frenzied activity. I mean, and going back to even Governor Granholm's speech, I mean, the crowd was so animated and so into that. I think there's just that kind of roar of the crowd when you're in the midst of it. So I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, obviously, the war against terror, and we want to make sure that he's not able to hurt us again and to do those types of activities. But so I don't know. I think that they've had that as their kind of slogan, as Joe Biden said when he was here in the state last week. General Motors is alive and Osama bin Laden is dead. So they've had that kind of as their bumper sticker logo, and their that's just what they've chosen to do.
Well, I mean, we don't have any serious discussion of the drone policy and all the other things that
That's
drive
true.
me personally crazy.
And me as well.
Killed someone today.
Pardon?
They killed someone today with a drone. Second in command in Yemen.
Oh, not one of our citizens? Why?
No,
I don't know. What they miss?
No, he got out of the car in time. I see. We can be just as callous as.
My first time on the show. I had no idea.
Yeah.
You'll never trust Ty.
Don't trust Ty. That's a bumper sticker.
Great. That'll help me out. Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Anwar al-Awlaki, 16-year-old son, was an American citizen. He was killed by a drone at a barbecue party with his friends. Those are the kinds of things that worry me. I am very delighted to see Glenn Greenwald is now writing. He left Salon. He's now writing for The Guardian. Good place to keep track of all those kinds of things. So we didn't hear much from the left. We've basically seen a lot of the conversation merge. I mean, clearly there was a strong motherhood theme in both parties, very strong on that, very strong national defense. In some ways, the Democrats have succeeded in taking that issue away from the Republicans. I do think that there's still a bit of a tussle over who can be the bigger war hawk on Israel. It's about the only distinction between the two anymore. So it did seem like there were two very similar. Although the audience at the Dems was much more diverse. When they flashed around with the cameras, you could definitely see the difference. And
they also allow alternates. Don't they?
Pardon?
The Dems allow the alternates. They have a very wide open convention.
There were alternates in Tampa.
I guess
they just sit up in the bowl.
Yeah. See, I think they integrate them in the audience.
Oh.
Yeah,
I do want to ask though, was the Republican convention as white and older as it appeared to us as viewers on national television?
It wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, even in our own Michigan delegation, I mean, there was a lot of diversity. There was different ages. There were African American members, Latino members. I mean, there really was diversity. There were some of the folks that have they've been going to convention for decades, and they're going to keep going to the conventions. But there were a lot of new people in the mix too. So it was there. I don't know how they pick their camera shots or how they do the different pieces, but there was. I mean, certainly it wasn't to the extent, certainly, as you could see on the images on the Democrat coverage. But no, I saw quite a bit.
That's going to be a big challenge. I mean, the party really will have
Absolutely.
to reach out. I think that's probably the first time I've ever seen in polling where the African American community was 94% for Obama to 0. I've never seen any poll ever where it was 0 for the opposition. So I think clearly there's some work to be done in that area.
Well, and what role did the conversation about the war on women, which obviously you're well aware of here in Michigan,
Right.
what role did that have on the whole, let's go to talk about mommy and chief and moms and wives and that sort of rah-rah that happened from both sides of the aisle? I mean, you saw it from both.
I think it's been, more, the conversation it's about, women business owners. I mean, women are hiring people. They want to look at it from what's the economic perspective. So it's more kind of talking about from an economic perspective. That's a woman's issue. That is, that's absolutely something that was focused on and that they were looking at to say, hey, this is important to us. This isn't just, we aren't only interested in what you may typically call women's issues. So that is an important focus. Yes, the crowd really responded extremely well to Ann Romney. It was a very, it was different from the just, here he is or how he appears on TV. So she was trying to kind of share who he is in real life. And the crowd really responded to that. But, the group was really saying, we want to talk about what we're going to do in terms of the economy.
She had a great opportunity. She defined women in terms of mother, sister, daughter, and it would have been nice to have thrown in business owner.
True.
Which Michelle Obama did do.
Yeah.
And Jill Biden also talked about it as.
And we heard a lot about her
Absolutely.
as Dr. Jill Biden too.
Yeah, we did get that as well. So, but I do think. I found it very interesting to sort of watch the rhetoric that was being played out, particularly with women, because I think that there's a battle going on for women's votes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It was fascinating.
If
to
Obama
watch
wins,
that
it will be
conversation.
women who put him in.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's clearly from what the polls are showing going to be that and the Hispanic vote are going to be the significant difference. The African American vote is there, but if you add in the piece with the Hispanic vote and the women's vote, makes it tough.
It's interesting. I'm curious. Because I'm not seeing the kind of the youth tide
Not
like
at
we
all.
did 4 years ago. Are you? Well,
I mean, there are none.
I teach.
But 4 years ago,
There's
that
ripple
was
in the
an
water.
overwhelming
Ripple,
tide.
No, there's not. We've
Bad
talked
choice of
about that
words.
quite a bit because it just doesn't
I teach
seem
at
to
Michigan
exist.
State, and my class has 260. One class has 264 students in it, and many of them will be first-time voters. They're freshmen, and the reality is, I'd say half of them aren't going to vote because they just really don't know who to vote for. They don't know where to get information. They're confused and baffled by the ads. They don't have much of a frame of reference to hang it on, and the era of excitement and idealism that the Obama campaign inspired, I think, has been wrung out of the culture since the economic collapse. I think the level of optimism is gone. I think these kids are scared to death that they're not going to get a job. They're just focused on that, and that's a whole different era. It's very worrisome. Very worrisome. I'm sorry to see it too, because I think it was.
You never want people feeling like,
No.
well, I can skip it. You never want anybody thinking that.
I
But you also want to make sure that people are educated and informed when they show up at the polls.
I get in huge arguments on my Facebook page all the time because I talk about how voting is a sacred duty. Right. And boy, do people get ticked off when I talk about
Especially
a
as
duty or a
what's
sacred
this
duty.
sacred
Or,
stuff?
you
It's
can
so
still have
sacred.
something that's sacred. You can't
yell
In the
at him.
wrong way.
You can't yell at him for saying sacred and then respond with.
Well, but I think you can have sacred without having the religious connotation. I do believe that.
It's Todd's dictionary time.
That's right. Shall we pull out the dictionary meaning? Because
Sacred, meaning.
not profane.
Yes.
Which, we can talk about sacred versus profane violence, which has nothing to do with religion. So I do think that there's some reality there. Shall we get into some
One closing question I have to put to Todd. I have to find out. Your buddy Fred Carger that you took, that you took all around Michigan.
I did.
And he was the first openly gay candidate for the Republican Party, running for president. Was he there at the convention?
He did go to the convention, and he actually announced before he went down that he would not be endorsing Mitt Romney, nor would he be supporting Mitt Romney, because of Mitt's anti-gay stances, because of his anti-women stances, and because he believes that Mitt Romney has moved away from what the Republican Party that he remembers, that Ford sort of era of Republicans. So he's announced he's supporting Barack Obama.
Is he really?
Yep.
That'll make him very popular with the Republicans, as he was before.
Not that he was popular to begin
Yeah,
with.
right.
Although, to his credit, he did get 1% of the vote here in Michigan, which I think actually speaks well not only to him, but I also think it speaks well to Michigan Republicans. That they were willing to stand up and say, yeah, I'll vote for the first openly gay candidate for president. I think that says something for Michigan voters.
Yeah. Is he going to continue to do this? What is his next step?
He actually has launched an international boycott of Amway and Altacorp, because the DeVos family has donated over $500,000 to anti-marriage equality stuff. So they're punishing him for that. So he's doing that, and he's going to continue going to colleges and talking to people.
Well, it's a fascinating evening, and thank you so much,
Thank you for
Geraldine.
coming down.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We'll get you back, I hope. I hope we didn't scare you
Had a
away.
good time,
Thank you
yeah.
to Todd Haywood. We always have fun down here in the basement. It sort of loosens things up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to be joined now by David, and you will introduce him, Bill, because you know more about this than I do.
I know quite a bit about David. Dave really is going to join us. Dave is a developer in the city. I know he doesn't like to be called a developer, but he restores homes. And a year ago, he was on the show to talk about the restoration of a couple units he did over on the east side. He's back again tonight. There's going to be an open house of 2 craftsman-style homes that you've restored, right, Dave?
That's right. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Tell us where they are and what they look like and how they fit in the neighborhood.
Sure. These are on the east side, in the east side neighborhood. They're at 141 and 139 Leslie Street, which runs south off Michigan Avenue.
By what?
Just around the corner from the Green Door,
Yes.
Amos Restaurant. That's it.
Where the street's all torn up right now.
The
Michigan
commercial.
Avenue is torn up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can get to them pretty easily. There's 2 houses there. 139 we did about 4 years ago, and had an open house. And at that time we got a hold of 141, so we had 139 a finished product. 141 had been gutted, and after, I guess we're 4 years later, we finished 141, and it's really a great opportunity for people to see what's possible with old houses. These are old craftsman houses built in 1915 with all the original trim. But what we do is we restore the character of the house, but all new utilities and all new wiring and plumbing and that sort of thing. So
There'll be an open house?
Yep, open house, co-sponsored by the Allen Neighborhood Center and the Greater Lansing Historical Society. I'm the builder, but I'm also connected with both of those organizations, and so it gives an opportunity for me to sort of put my work out on display, not because I have a big ego, but because I like people to see what's possible, like I said. And both of those groups are very interested in A, history, and B, community development, community, history, and these 2 houses represent that to a T, I think.
Now, who would have typically have had these houses built and then lived in them?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's a fascinating thing. 1915 is when that end of Leslie Street started becoming quite developed, and a lot of it was, the auto industry was gearing up, and there was a lot of Rio employees and folks like that were buying. I mean, these were subdivisions. These were the original subdivisions, and they were being built, on tight 33-foot lots, and out of Sears catalogs or catalog homes. And so until the 60s, these were pretty much family-style neighborhoods. In fact, in 1940, a guy named Charles Barksley lived in 141, and he worked for the Lansing State Journal. And when we were doing the restoration, we found these old papier-mâché print sheets that they'd used to print the newspaper, and they were stapled up in the attic in the walls, apparently to keep the air from blowing through.
Though, they're thick, aren't
They're
they?
thick, and they're very interesting.
Yeah.
And, and so he worked for the State Journal. This stuff's up in the attic, 2 and 2. And so those kind of things is what really is fascinating about this exercise.
What was the biggest challenge of doing this house?
The foundation wall on the south side, on the driveway side, which is a shared driveway, had deteriorated to the point of collapse. And we had to dig that out completely, put a new footing in, put a new wall up. So as far as, actual physical expense and physical work and expense, that was the toughest thing on that particular house.
What do you think a highlight of these kind of homes is? What turns you on about these homes?
I think a lot of people, all the oak woodwork appeals. The original, not only the material, but the size of the material. This is 4.5 inches wide, plus 3/4 inch thick. I mean, it's you couldn't afford to trim even an expensive house with this stuff, let alone
My new laminate floors are what, an eighth of an inch?
precisely. I mean, you're talking about microscopic surfaces you live against, but the idea of the depth of the material
Yeah.
is very important. It comes from old growth timber. I mean, this is truly sustainable type development. When you take an old house like this and instead of throw it away, restore it. I mean, it's extremely labor intensive. That's what keeps a lot of these things from happening. But I think it's the trim, oak floors, wide, generous pieces of material that were used.
You can't maintain plaster. You have to switch to plasterboard.
Not necessarily.
No?
Every job is different. Some plaster is a great material, and if it's in good shape, leave it alone.
Oh, really?
Generally, though, the houses that we get into, or I get into, the plaster is in bad enough shape that it comes out, all the plaster and lath. That allows us to get into the walls and put new plumbing and new wiring and insulate them.
That's the big issue, isn't it?
It's a huge issue with old houses.
They were built on centers that were narrow, so.
Well, it depends on the era. Like I like working in this era, the teens through the 30s, which is the east side, because the houses were built at 16-inch on center. The studs were a full 4 inches. They weren't 3 and 5/8 like they are now, and they were never designed to be insulated particularly. But we've adapted with our materials to insulate walls like that, and there's things you can do. I mean, there are, you have to make compromise in certain areas. But, if we want to maintain a housing stock and maybe we should turn this thermostat down 2 degrees and be a little less comfortable and save some of these buildings. I mean, a lot of it has to do with our behavior and our expectations about comfort as well.
Yeah, I know of friends nowadays who keep their home in the mid-50s. And that's maybe a little.
That's a little extreme.
That's chilly in a hypothermia land.
That's a little extreme, but we humans think we have such a narrow comfort zone, and it gets smaller and smaller. I mean, the most sustainable houses were the ones that were built 100 years ago, where people suffered from heat and cold, but they had clean air and they had lots of energy.
The wind blew through them. In some instances,
and ventilated them nicely.
My home was ventilated when I moved in. It had been built by the previous owners, and I went to replace a light bulb behind a valance and found snow around it. That was a clue that maybe it was a little bit more ventilated than I planned on.
David, now will these be rental units then?
Yeah. At this point, this will be a rental, and so we certainly open house. We're also soliciting if anybody has interest in renting.
Now, what kind of renters typically are taking on? Because this is kind of a special home then for them.
Yeah. We look for people generally like graduate students, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We have other rental properties. But this is a particularly nice building, and looking for somebody that has that sort of, sensibility to, fine finishes and respect for the property and stuff. So, I mean,
that area does have now more faculty and graduate students.
It's a very interesting neighborhood, as you guys know. The East Side everything is always changing all the time.
Yeah.
By street, this street has a lot of professional people living on it, and it's attractive to students. We're just off Michigan Avenue, the #1 bus line, Kalamazoo Street. I mean, it's very convenient. We're still trying to overcome the idea that we, live in a less desirable neighborhood, but I've lived there for 8 years now, and with my family, and this conversation starts. Well, you live in a bad part of town. Okay, so what do you want to talk about next?
Thank you to Dave. We appreciate hearing about those wonderful Craftsman homes and the open house this weekend. And we'll see you next Monday night. This is Lansing Online News Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Yeah. That was only 10 seconds off. not bad with all the technical issues we had.